VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Well, thank you, Mr. Morris, and a good day to each of our listeners. Some of you at noontime out there in the West Coast, some of you in the afternoon, but it's time to talk here on Crosstalk, and we're so glad to have you join us. We're going to be talking about some things that relate to a great, big, tall, skinny building in New York. It's called the United Nations. There have been people, in fact, I think it was one of the who was it? Huckabee, I think, said that he wished they would take jackhammers and put it on a barge and float it down the river. But whatever it is, it has, to many of us, been a point of irritation because I thought America was America, and suddenly we have this monstrosity in New York trying to tell us that we really should be part of a united world. Well, the one world government thing's been around for a while. But I want you to join us today because we're going to be talking about some intrusions, some things that you may not be aware of dealing with the UN. Our guest today is David Williams. And David is he is the president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. They're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to educating the public through the research and analysis and dissemination of information of the government's effects on the economy. That word economy is something that I think we're all concerned about. Now, Mr. Williams is with us online today, and David, welcome to Crosstalk.
Thank you for having me. And when you mentioned that tall, skinny building, it has a very fat budget.
That's so, for sure.
Don't let the tall, skinny building fool you, because they have quite a bit of our money.
And sadly, tentacles that are reaching out for more,
right.
for more.
Absolutely.
You know, one of the things, before we get into our topic, David, a thing I can't understand, this thing of money, of course, and government spending and all that kind of stuff. Recently, we saw stuff in Egypt happen, the big change in government there, and we have been dumping billions into that country, and they hate our guts.
Yeah, it's really kind of a weird dynamic that taxpayers are put through in this country, where the government takes our money and it funds these countries that hate our guts, and it funds projects and programs that we may find offensive, that we may not agree with. And, therein lies the problem, is that a lot of our tax dollars go to things that we have no choice. I mean, we're not able to dictate where the money goes to, and it really is against, who we are, our morality, and it's very disconcerting.
Well, David, I'm going to use a very coarse word, but folks, don't be offended. It's factual. What I see going on in this world economy is what I would call cultural prostitution.
Yeah.
Meaning we are buying favors from foreign governments by paying them money. And as we think of the term prostitution, of course, has one connotation, but there are many. When you're realizing that governments are prostituting their integrity all for the price of money. And when I see that we're giving foreign aid, which is a fancy word for dumping taxpayer monies into other countries, and when you see this happening, there's good reason to be concerned. But David, a few years ago, the Tea Party sprang up, the TEA, of course, standing for taxed enough already. Remember those terms?
Absolutely.
Now we're seeing a renewed effort on the part of the UN and the European Union to subject taxpayers to an international tax on two fronts.
Right.
The emissions tax and a tobacco tax. Tell us about it.
Well, let me first just say that I love the Tea Party, but I wish that the Tea Party would have been founded 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I can only imagine how different government spending would be, if we had the Tea Party during George Bush's administration, or even before that. And I'm happy that we have it. I'm glad that it was formed in 2008 and 2009. But I look back and I just wonder what would be different, and if this would have happened a long time ago. And the United Nations is an organization that is really looking for a power grab. And they do this through a number of ways. They do it through nation building, but now they have found a new way to do this, and it's through taxation and collecting taxes from so-called richer countries like the United States, Great Britain, and then distributing that money to the poorer countries. And they do this in the name of social engineering.
Now, let me say this, David. When we think of the taxing, and long before the taxpayer organization or the Tea Party ever erupted, sitting at this microphone several years before, I had said these words. I said, "Where is the rage? Where is the concern of America?" I said, "When back in our history, a small tax placed on tea caused people to turn Boston Harbor into a big iced tea bowl." There were people that marched. There were people that did something. And my question was, why in the world are we letting this go on? Well, now we've seen, and I certainly claim no credit for the Tea Party springing up, but the question was there. Why did it take so long for people to suddenly say, without even hesitating, I've got to do something. I'm a taxpayer.
We lost our edge.
Yeah.
I really think that between the founding of the country and until recently, the country, when it comes to holding the government's feet to the fire, whether it's elected or non-elected officials, we kind of lost our edge, and we became complacent. And it really took an almost financial collapse for people to wake up and to see, and not only the financial collapse, but it was the reaction of the government, of the government officials, the reaction of these officials to that financial collapse. And it just wasn't Democrats. It was Democrats and Republicans. I don't know if you probably remember September of 2008 that Henry Paulson, who was the Treasury Secretary, came out and said that if we don't pass this Wall Street bailout bill now, it's going to be Armageddon. They were talking about these dire circumstances, and he said if we don't pass this within 48 hours, the whole world is going to collapse financially. Well, it took Congress 2 or 3 weeks to pass it because they had to sweeten it up with their earmarks, their tax breaks, and everything else. But the world didn't come to a halt in this 2 to 3 weeks, and it's really, we should be concerned about how politicians react to these crises, and it's not very statesmanlike their reaction is. Always to spend more money.
David, these are two taxes, and I'd like to take them apart. First of all, talking now, folks, emissions tax is one, and we're talking about emissions. That has a buzzword that's called the carbon footprint.
Right.
Now, I've seen some of our purists worrying about idling semi-trucks through the winter when the guys are in their sleeper and have to take a break from the driving, and so they pull over, and because the truck is a diesel, and I'm well acquainted with diesel machines, they sit and idle to keep the engines warm and keep the cab warm while they sleep. But immediately there was, we've got to do something about stamping out all this carbon emissions. Then one of the biggest complainers about carbon emissions is Mr. Al Gore, and he jumps into his corporate jet and blows carbon all over the skies. And along comes our president with Air Force One, and when you fire up a 747, and I'm well acquainted with airplanes because I fly one, but when you think of the soot and the junk that comes out of those jet engines, that's carbon. And when you realize just the cost of the fuel and what happens to it, and then, don't forget the C-130 that's got to come along behind with the vehicles that are used in transporting the president. And, yes, remember the president's wife, her schedule doesn't match with the president, so you've got to bring her on a separate jet. And then, of course, remember the little fighter planes that come along just to make sure everything goes safe.
And you remember it was, I believe, the first year of his presidency that the president and Mrs. Obama had a date night.
New York City.
But the date night was New York City, so they had to take, a plane to New York, and of course, as you mentioned, all the surrounding security and back in one night. So it's really tough to claim to be that you're an environmentalist when when you have these sorts of actions. And as far as Al Gore, the former vice president. My friend in Tennessee who ran the Tennessee think tank actually looked at Al Gore's electricity usage. This was 4 or 5 years ago, and found out that he was spending thousands of dollars on the mansion and his personal residence. So the hypocrisy is just dripping with these folks that tell us that we need to conserve energy, we need to have these vehicles, yet they don't do the same thing. It's it's really just there's no other word for it other than hypocrisy. And when we talk about the carbon tax and really all the taxes by these international bodies, you have to think about the social engineering, the behavioral control that they're trying to accomplish, because these taxes have two purposes. One is to raise revenue for their bloated bureaucracies, their programs. But really the second objective is for behavior control, is that bureaucrats and politicians don't think we're behaving in a way that is good and that is acceptable. So, that's really, the rest of the story is what they're trying to do with these taxes, and is trying to control our behavior.
We know that the airlines will not be able to absorb a tax, but will pass it on to the consumers.
Right.
Now, what kind of numbers are we talking about there with the airlines?
Well, probably upwards of $1 to $3 billion a year, and I don't know.
You said B with a B? With a B.
With a B, and I don't know if you mentioned that you're a pilot, and I don't know if you fly commercially or if you've been on a commercial flight, but the taxes associated with flying today is almost half of what the ticket actually costs. I mean, we've built in so much money into the cost of a ticket, and we wonder why airlines are going bankrupt and are consolidating and are struggling. It's because they are so heavily taxed, and I don't think people realize just how heavily taxed airline travel is.
One of the things also is interesting, and I'm not sure this is a UN tax, but even the talk among private aviation to establish a landing and takeoff fee for every time you use your airplane, to file a tax against pilots in normal public aviation.
And that I wasn't aware of, but I assume that is a U.S.-based tax.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's big arguments going on with the FAA and the AOPA, and talking about all the stuff that is coming along and the hazard it would bring to general aviation. But again, not just talking about airlines. What about the trucks? I mean, already we're seeing our fuel at $4 plus a gallon, some places close to $5 a gallon in certain municipalities. And you know what happens? That money gets passed on to the cost of the food and the products we buy. And we're seeing this tax thing. Now, I'm not sure, again, some of that, of course, is U.S. tax. But now the UN wants to get into it. We're going to take a break and be right back in 60 seconds. This is Crosstalk on VCY America.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, what can science tell us about the virgin birth?
Chris, the only answer that science can give is that the virgin birth is impossible. It can't happen, but it did happen. That's what makes it a miracle. Today, there are certain animals which do remarkable things. Some can change sex, some can fertilize themselves, but for mammals and humans, the male must fertilize the egg from the female. Modern-day cloning techniques circumvent the fertilization process, but are not remotely similar to a virgin birth. The only way this could happen is for the Creator of mankind to create that fertilized egg perfect, without mutation, without blemish, and allow it to grow in Mary's womb. Yes, the virgin birth was scientifically impossible, but the whole Christian message rests on the fact that on one occasion it did happen in the past. It all started back in Genesis.
For more on Genesis, call 1-800-7-GENESIS.
And this is Crosstalk coming your way on the VCY America Radio Network and all of our affiliate stations. And if you appreciate Crosstalk, take a moment and call your station managers and thank them for the privilege of the information you get, because they are the ones that provide the airtime. We do not pay for airtime. Your local station provides the airtime as their investment in your community. And so if you would, contact your station. If it's a station that is supported by donation dollars, stand with them, as many of our stations are non-commercial. Dealing with these issues is so important, and again, we are just grateful for the honor to be on the air. Now, we're talking, of course, about the emissions tax and the carbon footprints and all the strange angles of this, with the UN getting involved in the act. But now, in addition to that, I hear that and I am not a smoker. I don't support tobacco. I am glad there's no smoking around where I am, and I don't want even the secondary stuff. But the interesting thing is the international tobacco tax. What's this all about?
Right, and this is through the World Health Organization. And what the World Health Organization is doing, they want countries to raise their tax on tobacco. And let me just say, I don't smoke either. Mm-hmm. And I've never smoked in my life. My dad smoked 3.5 packs of cigarettes a day, and I saw what smoking does to someone.
Sure.
But that said, we have farmers that's their livelihood. And now we have an international organization, the World Health Organization, that is dictating to us, and hopefully won't be, but we're trying to stop it, is dictating to us that, you have to raise your tax on tobacco so it's at least 70% of the cost of a pack of cigarettes, and we're going to do an earmarked tax. So you have to put another 5-cent tax on this to fund health care around the world. And this is fascinating, because there's just reams and reams of documents that the World Health Organization has put out, and they really kind of shoot themselves in the foot, because they say things like, do not allow concerns about employment impact to prevent this tax increase.
Oh. Our guest today, David Williams, the president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. Now, this, folks, is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to educating the public through the research, analysis, and dissemination of information on the government and its effect on economy. And now, of course, looking at the connection to the UN. But it's not just the UN who wants to get in on the act, but how about the European Union? Who in the world has granted the UN or the European Union, the authority to bring such taxes on us? And isn't this a violation of international law?
Well, and that's what we're exploring, is that it really is a violation of national sovereignty, is when you have an international body dictating what your tax structure is, what your tax rates are. So, this is a point of contention that we have brought up with these bodies. Unfortunately, they don't listen very well, but the European Union is, a number of months ago, I was in Brussels, which is the headquarters for the European Union, and it struck me that it's a fake capital, because they've created this union out of whole cloth. I mean, basically, you have, at least in this country, we have Washington, D.C. It's the capital of the country. This is fake. The European Union is a fake union. They decided to put this together, and we've seen problems. We see the problem with Greece, with Spain, with Italy. So the European Union really is out of control in the way that it's creating bureaucracies and spending money, and not really helping the countries that are members of it.
Now, as we see this stuff going on, and folks, the taxation and the involvement, taxation, of course, we're talking about these two taxes going through the UN and the European Union. But this, in my opinion, is getting the old camel's nose into the tent, because there's more to follow. And we cannot ignore some of the past stuff that's been floating around, such as the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And there are other aspects where the tentacles of this world organization are seeking to invade and literally, in my opinion, destroy the democracy that we have enjoyed here in our country. Your thoughts?
Boy, I'm so glad you brought that up, because these are these baby steps actually lead to bigger problems. And in a world where the economy is struggling, we can't allow these things to happen. We saw 20 years ago, food for oil, the money that was siphoned out of food for oil, when Saddam Hussein was in power. Mm-hmm. So they create these programs and these bureaucracies under the guise of helping people, of philanthropy, but I really call it phony philanthropy. Mm. Because they create these bureaucracies, and we've seen in the past with the World Health Organization is that there's been no transparency in the administration. We see money being siphoned off for excess salaries, and when they've been audited, there's really no one to audit them. So there's really no, and as Americans, we need to demand more out of our elected officials to make sure that our money does not go towards these entities.
David, you have a website, and I'd like our people to be aware of your organization, and also if you have news information they can gather. So give us the story.
It's protectingtaxpayers.org, and I would encourage people to go to the website, contact me. I can put you on my email list. I send out a weekly update every week.
Protectingtaxpayers.org.
Correct.
Okay.
And if they want to contact me personally, it's David Williams at protectingtaxpayers.org. I usually don't give out my personal email address, but I'd be more than happy for people to contact me directly and to stay in touch and let me know what they see.
What can our listeners do? In a few moments, we're going to open our phone lines and let people talk on this thing. But what can listeners do? Is there anyone in Congress standing up for this?
Senator John Thune from South Dakota has been a champion in stopping these taxes, and in particular the carbon tax. But I would say call your member of Congress, your local member of Congress and your senator, and let them know, because the United States has not yet signed on to this new tobacco tax increase. So there is time to stop this, and we're going to have a petition on our website starting tomorrow that people can sign, and if they email me, I can send them a copy of the petition and they can sign it. But really, we want to encourage people to contact their elected officials, and this goes with any government waste, anything that you see that you're not happy with. Is your member of Congress needs to know that people are upset, because that's how we got rid of the bridge to nowhere a number of years ago.
Now, folks, there's a number that I want you to take your pen or pencil. I want you to write this down, because this number I've memorized it. It's 202-224-3121.
Yep.
Or 202-225-3121. Those are two numbers that ring at the congressional switchboard. That is Congress. And you might say, well, boy, I don't know who my representatives are, who my senators are. You don't even have to know that. All you have to do is tell them where you live, and they will turn around and connect you with the people in power. And you may not get to talk to your senator, or you may talk to your assembly person, but you want to know something? If you leave your word, they record. They put a piece of paper for every call. Ask that you get a letter of response. And give them your name and tax. Don't have to be afraid of that. Nobody's going to come and knock your door down.
And let me just follow up with that. I've had friends that have worked on Capitol Hill for members of Congress, and they say that if they get 5 or 6 phone calls on one particular issue, they get a little bit worried. So don't think that you have to generate thousands of calls. It really does make a difference. Each person can make a difference, and let your voice be heard. So don't think that you're just one voice and no one's going to listen. It's amazing how few people members of Congress will listen to.
Well, David, we have 92 radio stations on that we're on right at this moment. And if you figured 100 people that would respond from every radio station, would you believe, folks, that would be 9,200 phone calls that would go to Congress?
Wow.
And you can do it. And the people that listen to this show are very responsible, David. They will call, they will let people know their thoughts many times by the hundreds. And so, folks, again, I'm going to give you the number in case you missed it. But we're talking about a tax, a United Nations tax on emissions, and then a tax on tobacco again. The whole idea of the taxation is what we're fighting. And again, I emphasize I am not a defender of tobacco because it's a dirty habit. But the issue we're talking about is once they're taxing one thing and then it's another, and the next thing they're going to be taxing your kids, or like China having the one-child philosophy. Now, here it is, the phone number again, 800. No, it's not 800. You have to pay for this call, 202-224-3121 and 202-225-3121. Those numbers, put it on your refrigerator. Anytime you hear something, call up, tell them I'm Murgatroyd Smith from Podunk, Iowa, or wherever you are. And I am calling regarding this. I want my congressman or my senator. And when you make a call to your Congress people, that's one. Then you turn around and make another call to the Senate, because these are issues that must be dealt with. Now, one of the things that scares me, David, is these things that Hillary Clinton and others can do, where they signing some kind of an agreement that doesn't even have to be done by Congress.
No, there's a lot of power that's vested in the executive branch, and conversely with the agencies. And we really never do know what Hillary Clinton is doing abroad. I mean, we'll see the mainstream media, do the photo ops, but we have no idea what's being said behind closed doors, and the selling off of our interest as a nation. And we've seen this, in the past, and it's very disconcerting and very nerve-wracking whenever the Secretary of State travels abroad.
Yesterday, our national debt hit $16 trillion.
Yeah.
What's your reaction to this?
Well, it happened right in the middle of the Democratic National Convention.
Couldn't have happened at a better time.
And I didn't see a lot of people talking about that last night, and you probably won't see a lot of people talking about it today. And it's frustrating. I mean, I know that's an understatement, but it's very frustrating. But I have to tell you, I am hopeful for this country, and I'll tell you why. Is that last year we had that big debate on the debt ceiling increase. People were really energized, talking about government spending. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I have never witnessed a time in my life as a taxpayer advocate where we've had such a rigorous discussion about the national debt, about the debt ceiling, and taxpayers we didn't get everything that we wanted last year. But I got to tell you, I was so happy that we had the discussion, that people were so engaged, because I don't think at any other time in the history of this nation have we had this discussion. And it took 20, 40, 60 years for the government to get to where it is today, bloated and big and out of touch. And it's not going to happen overnight. Downsizing the government, but we can't give up, and that's why, bringing the conversation back to the Tea Party, why the Tea Party, needs our support to keep the pressure on members of Congress.
A man in the Navy said it this way, and he said the country is spending money like a drunken sailor. But he said that's an insult to the sailor because he said when he was a drunken sailor, when he ran out of money, he quit spending. Now, I'm not defending drunkenness, but it was kind of an interesting observation. We'll be right back. This is Crosstalk.
Is America on a collision course with God? In the book, As America Has Done to Israel, author John McTernan indicates there is a direct correlation between the alarming number of massive disasters striking America and our leaders pressuring Israel to surrender her land for peace. Costing hundreds of lives and causing hundreds of billions of dollars worth of damage, dozens of disasters, including devastating earthquakes, raging fires, hurricanes, floods, and tornadoes, have hit America, and always within just a short time after putting pressure on Israel. The book not only points out the correlation to these events, but also gives guidance as to what you can do as an individual and what America can do to change the direction of our country in relation to Israel. Copies of the book As America Has Done to Israel are available for a donation of $17 or more to VCY America and can be obtained by calling 1-800-729-9829. That's 1-800-729-9829.
And welcome back to Crosstalk, where today we're visiting with David Williams, the president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. They're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to educating the public through the research and analysis and dissemination of information on the government's effects on the economy and our taxation. Today we've been touching on the issue of the UN wanting to get a tax on emissions. And, of course, who knows? Wouldn't it be interesting to see things go back to the days of Mr. Eisenhower? A pilot friend of mine who flew for United Airlines was sitting at National Airport one day, and all of a sudden, as they were at the jetway, and they weren't ready to push back yet, and all of a sudden the radios crackled, and the tower announced, it said, this airport is now closed to traffic until further notice. And they watched as a little Cessna 310, which is a twin-engine Cessna airplane, comes landing and lands there at National Airport. And so one wiseacre on the radio says, like, who do you have to be to have that kind of service? And the tower came back with a very cold voice. It said, like the President of the United States. It was an Eisenhower coming in on a Cessna 310. Well, that thing sips a gallon of gas compared to these jets. But anyway, interesting story. Okay, we continue to hear about some of the stuff that's going on. There's a lot of conflicting information coming out on Medicare and the cost of Obamacare, and your organization's been monitoring this. Can you separate the fact from the fiction?
Been monitoring it very closely. The initial price tag of Obamacare was $940 billion. This was 2.5 years ago. Today, that price tag is $2.6 trillion.
Oh.
I mean, that's mind-boggling to think that we've seen that percent increase in just a little over 2 years. And one of the components, the way that they want to pay for this, is with Medicare cuts. And the amount of the cuts started at $500 billion 2.5 years ago, and now they're up to $716 billion in Medicare cuts over 10 years. Now, let's be clear. These Medicare cuts are not coming from waste, fraud, and abuse. This is not how they're achieving those savings. What they are doing is they are taking these out of payments to doctors. So you're going to have this what they call the Independent Payment Advisory Board that's going to determine what services, how much each of these services is worth, and the doctors are going to get paid. What do you think that's going to do?
It's going to make doctors quit being doctors.
Absolutely, and that's what we've seen with some polling, that doctors are retiring early. Some people aren't even getting into the profession because they're afraid of what is down the road. And it doesn't change Medicare. It doesn't fundamentally change what Medicare is, just the payments. And when you have someone like Representative Paul Ryan, who's the vice presidential nominee, he has proposed a fundamental restructuring of Medicare, which makes it more solvent and brings choice into the program. So if you are a senior, if you're approaching Medicare age, you get to choose the government-run program or the premium support program. And what do I mean by premium support is that you get to choose which plan, which health care plan you want as a senior. The same choice that members of Congress and federal employees have. And why Congress as a whole would not want you to have the same choice that they have is absolutely beyond me.
Hey, I'm a senior. I'm well into that thing. And Medicare is pretty helpful, I tell you, when you have serious infliction. It sure is.
And that's why we need to strengthen it. We need to make sure that it is it's here for a lot longer. Right now, the plan is that it's going to go bankrupt in 12 years, in 10 to 12 years. And, we can't keep on putting this off. We have to make these changes now. And under Paul Ryan's plan, he says that, for catastrophic illnesses, there will be a safety net for folks. So we're not just throwing you into a profit plan and saying good luck. There will be a safety net. But what they are doing is saying you are going to have the choice. You're going to be able to choose and really take control of your own future when it comes to health care.
David, is there any legitimate legislative effort, not just talk, but legitimate effort to curb government waste and spending?
There is. The problem is that right now we have 535 members of Congress, 435 in the House, 100 in the Senate. We have about a dozen members of Congress that we can count on day in and day out to offer real solutions for spending cuts, to bring greater efficiency. So we are absolutely outnumbered. And if you look at the difference between the Senate and the House of Representatives, it's just striking because the House of Representatives in the past, they have put through hundreds of billions of dollars in spending cuts. The Senate refuses to take up the legislation, and the president refuses to take a leadership role and force the Senate to take up these spending cut amendments. So it's frustrating because we have some guys and gals in Congress that are trying to push legislation to cut spending, and once it goes to the Senate, it really dies a horrible death.
Folks, we're going to open our phone lines right now, 800-733-9829. If you'd like to get online with our guest, David Williams, maybe you've got some feelings on this. And again, if you want to get more information of what David's talking about, he's got a website. It's www.protectingtaxpayers.org. protectingtaxpayers.org. I think you'll find some very interesting things. You had a number where people could call you as well?
Yes, it's 703-229-0254. And please, feel free to email me directly at my personal account at davidwilliams@protectingtaxpayers.org.
All right, our telephone lines are already starting to light up from around the country. And folks, this is stuff right in our backyard. And the UN comes along and they would like to tax you, I think they could start first with taxing Air Force One. That's my personal opinion. I know the smell of exhaust coming out of a jet, and, they could start. Maybe a Piper Cub would be better, or maybe getting back to a Cessna 310. Well, let's go right now to Earl, who's standing by in Mobile, Alabama. And, Earl, you are on the air. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I was here a while back in the doctor's office. I'm disabled. Mm-hmm. And it had a Muslim guy in there and his wife and a couple kids. And I was sitting by the desk, waiting for another step to go where I can have my other surgery. And he couldn't speak English. She couldn't speak English. So he just flipped out a note and all the Medicare cards and Medicaid cards. And we want to know where all our money's gone.
Okay. Thank you so much, Earl. Go ahead, David.
Well, and you have such rigidity in Medicare and Medicaid that people oftentimes aren't getting the care that they need, deserve, and really have paid into. And Medicare, we've paid into it for years, and that's when people ask me about Medicare and the cost of it. Obviously, as a taxpayer advocate, that's a concern. But I really think the biggest problem is just the patient-doctor relationship and how that is going to suffer. Because when it comes down to it, when someone has an ailment, they want that ailment corrected and fixed, and Obamacare does not do that, and Medicare currently structured, is going to have a tougher time doing that if they're going to take $716 billion out of it. So that's, a major concern that we should have is the care.
And what we're watching there, David, is that $716 billion that they take out of Medicare funds, folks, that's raiding the lockbox, which is a misnomer. It's not locked.
Right.
And they've got their hands in there all the time. But then you're talking about this amount of money being taken out of what would go into caring for you and us, and then it gets put in this new program. So, I mean, it's not a lockbox. Somebody threw the key away a long time ago.
They opened the box up and threw the key away. Instead of closing the box and throwing the key away, they opened it.
Folks, I got
the key away.
I got some open lines right now, folks. If you'd like to call and talk with David, give us your impressions. Some of you guys using diesel trucks, diesel tractors, the carbon footprint. Just think, when you go out and harvest your corn and you're driving a diesel, I mean, everything has a carbon price on it. Yeah. And if we have one thing, if they're doing it on a national tax, but now the UN wanting to get in on the act, if they want to start taxing things, why doesn't the UN go over to China or some place where they're really smoking things up?
Boy, and one of the biggest opponents of this new tax is China. China has they're screaming about these new taxes. So it's kind of a strange world when when the two of us start agreeing with China.
Mike in Bayview, Wisconsin, and we've got open lines here. 800-733-9829. 800-733-9829. Toll free from anywhere on the globe. Right now, Mike in Bayview. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Vic. Yeah, this is just amazing what's going on in this country, and I'm afraid the UN is, they keep getting as powerful, or if they're not already too powerful, they're going to be coming and kicking down our doors and telling us and pulling the change out of our pocket. I'm a smoker, and I'll tell you what, the price of cigarettes has gone skyrocketing just terribly over the last 4 years, and I think if they do that to the people with alcohol, I think that we'd have a riot on our hands, and I think maybe that's what has to happen in this country. And I think we should bulldoze this. Everybody but Ron Johnson and a very few others are the ones that seem to be helping us out here, and God bless him and give him a thanks. But man, I'll tell you, we're fighting a losing battle here, I'm afraid, for this country.
Well, Mike, I'm going to pray for you that you get rid of that old cigarette. That stuff will kill you.
I may have to. I'll tell you, I can't afford it.
Well, somebody once said this, and I'm not trying to be insulting, but somebody said a smoker. They said, "You don't smoke, do you?" And the guy says, "Yes, I do." He says, "No." He said, "The cigarette smokes. You're just a sucker."
Yeah, it's a bad habit. Hey. I must agree. But,
okay. Thanks for sharing, Mike.
All right.
Appreciate it. You bet.
And Mike hit it right on the head, and I didn't even get a chance to mention this yet, but the next item that they want to tax, the UN, is alcohol. They're already drafting these regulations and tax regulations for alcohol. So Mike hit the nail right on the head, and he probably had no idea, but his instinct was dead on with that one.
Well, that'll keep our highways a lot safer out there.
Yeah.
How about that? Let's go to Pensacola and talk with Sam, Pensacola, Florida. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, sir. You're on the air.
I was just curious with all the UN taxing. I am unfamiliar with the justification and how the UN got the authority to tax the United States of America.
Yeah.
Could you explain that?
As a member of the UN, we have given them that power because up until this point we have not said we haven't said no to the UN. So it's been they don't have any. They only have the power that we give them, and right now we've given them all the power that they want or need.
That's a good question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent.
Thank you. And let's go now to Somerset, Ohio. Whoa, wait, we're up against the break. Stand by, Ken in Somerset and Jan in Delavan. We'll be right back to you. This is Crosstalk on VCY America.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewweekend.com. Continuing on our series of what is real spiritual warfare, we've learned from 2 Corinthians 10, 3 through 5, Ephesians 6, 17, that real spiritual warfare is not railing at demons, but it is battling for the hearts of men and women, boys and girls, by destroying arguments raised up against the principles of the Lord, proclaiming the gospel, biblical truth. John MacArthur writes, Christians who verbally confront demons waste energy and demonstrate ignorance of the real war. We are not called to convert demons, but sinners. The battle is rather with the false ideologies men and demons propagate so that the world believes them. Paul further defines sinners' strongholds of ideas as every lofty thing that is, any biblical system of thought, exalted as truth, that is raised up against the knowledge of God. There is the key. Spiritual warfare is not a battle with demons. It is a battle for the minds of people who are captive to the lies that are exalted in opposition to the Scripture. For Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House.
And welcome back to Crosstalk, where that 53 minutes goes by so quickly. Glad to have you online here. We do have, all the lines are jammed right now. Let's go, let's see. First of all, the longest waiting out there is in Delavan. Jan in Delavan, Wisconsin. And Jan, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air, Jan.
Yes, we own a small trucking company, and the environmental fees keep getting higher and higher for disposal of tires and oil and all of that kind of thing. And then the excise taxes on the tires and the vehicles themselves are ridiculous already. And last, these portable generators that they now want all truckers to have instead of idling at night.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to just have a gas engine generator sit right underneath or on the opposite wall from Obama's headboard for about a month. Let him sleep with it running, because my husband can't stand the noise. He doesn't have one, but if his neighbor parked in the truck stop next to him has one, he can't stand the noise.
Well, and this is politicians being out of touch with reality and with folks like you, because they don't understand. When pursuing a political agenda, they don't talk to folks that are affected by it, whether it's financially with the excise taxes or just trying to conduct your business having this behind you. I mean, so I think, that's part of the problem, is that we don't have, everyday legislators that understand this. And, boy, it's almost tempting to support term limits when you see things like this, because I really think that if we had fresh faces in there and, some common sense folks, that, we could get rid of some of these things and these things would never happen.
Well, gasoline generators can put out monoxide, too. And I don't know, some of these bureaucrats don't know monoxide, or they don't know the difference between gas and diesel.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go further. Let's talk to Elmira, New York, and talk to Justin. Justin, you're on the air.
Yeah, I was just wondering, for the average citizen to buy this new insurance from Obamacare, I haven't heard any numbers of what it's actually going to cost an average citizen to purchase this. And if they don't, I haven't heard any numbers of what the actual fine is going to be for someone who doesn't do it. Have you heard about any numbers that might, you know what I mean?
Well, I do know that once the individual mandate, kicks in, I think it's 2014, that the first year it'll be about $500 for a family, but then by 2017 it's going to be up to $2,500 for a family. That's the fine.
When you say the fine is
that's the fine that the family will have to pay if they don't purchase health insurance. And I don't know how much the plans are going to be, and so I really can't talk to that aspect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate the call from Elmira, New York. We're going to go to Dan, who is on the road in Wisconsin. Dan, 18-wheeler? Hello, Dan. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Say, during the Revolutionary War, we fought against taxation without representation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, with the UN, how are we elected a representative? I mean, it just seems to me that, the UN has nothing. We're a sovereign country. We don't elect anybody. I'll just hang up and listen.
Okay,
well,
thank you.
No, he's absolutely right, and it is taxation without representation. And what we need to do is we need, as a country, to defund the United Nations, because we give upwards of $2 to $3 billion a year to the United Nations, and what we need is a Congress that cuts that funding. That's when you get an organization's attention, is when you cut their funding and get rid of their funding. So I think that's really what needs to happen first.
Well, we're coming down the home stretch here, and we got about 2 minutes left. And when I think of the efforts such as the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which we haven't talked about so much now, but all it takes is our Secretary of State to sign on with these things. Doesn't even take an act of Congress. It scares me silly when I hear that. I don't care who the Secretary of State is.
Right.
But all it takes is a move, and then how do you change it? Or is it changeable?
Well, I think everything is changeable, but it's easier to address it before it happens, and that's why, when you mentioned those phone numbers, 202-224-3121 and 202-225-3121, to call your member of Congress. It's so important to let your voice be heard, because it's what our country was built on, and it's what we need to reinforce, is that we're not alone in this country, and we need to have our voice be heard.
One last call here from Pensacola. Richard, you're on the air.
Hey, Vic, just a quick question, and that is, I'm from Florida, and I do like people like Rubio, some of the Tea Partiers, and I was just wondering if some of the folks we've been putting in office, those especially of the Tea Party, are they doing anything to, kind of get rid of this problem?
Good question.
Yes, I mean there is a movement, and unfortunately, it's not as mature as the other movements. Remember back in the 90s and 2000s with earmarks, and we eliminated earmarks, and but there just hasn't been enough on this yet, and that's why we're doing this outreach.
Well, we've got about 60 seconds left, and I want to give that to you, David. David, again, is David Williams, the president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. They're a nonprofit organization, nonpartisan, dedicated to educating the public through the research, analysis, and dissemination of information on the government's effect on the economy. Your final word, David.
I would just say that it's our money, it's our government, and we can't let our government subject us to international taxes, to unelected bureaucracies. And whether it's an international tax or a homegrown tax, we still have the power to combat these things and fight them. And I would just say, please join the Taxpayers Protection Alliance in this fight. Go to our website at protectingtaxpayers.org. Please email me at davidwilliams@protectingtaxpayers.org and help me in this fight.
David, thanks so much for being with us today. And folks, again, I'm going to repeat that number for Congress, because too many people leave it on your refrigerator and don't dial a number. It's 202-224-3121 or 202-225-3121. Call your taxpayers. Let your voice be heard, as long as we have a voice in America. Thanks for joining us on Crosstalk.
Listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.